Welcome to the second installment of repurposing the Dictaphone wax cylinder recorder. In this video, you can see me taking apart the machine. Fortunately, I've left this soaking in penetrating oil for the last week or two. PB Blaster sure doesn't smell that great, but it certainly does the job. Really, there was nothing I had too much trouble taking apart. There's a few times where a screw would feel a little difficult, but in that case, as you can see here, I would just tap it lightly with the hammer, and that would usually free it up enough that I can get it with very little trouble. Now, while I was taking this apart, I was thinking to myself how I could possibly repurpose this device. In the previous video, I had mentioned that I really appreciated the little clutch mechanism to engage and disengage the cylinder from the motor. So, as I thought more and more about using the rotating element of the cylinder and also connecting that to wanting to make some sort of music or sound device, I think I came up with what I'd like to do. So here's the idea. I'm going to fashion a variable speed motor on this, and I'm pretty sure I'll use actually a new motor that I have, but more on that later. But here's the idea. I will affix some sort of cylinder that's hollow that'll have beads in it. Maybe I'll even have sticking in through it little finishing nails. But this is the idea. It's going to be basically a white noise machine or a rain machine. So if you're familiar with a rain stick, like the percussion device, a rain stick, it's going to be a lot like that. So when you turn on the motor and engage the cylinder, it will spin and cause the sound of rain. So there's probably going to be a much easier way to do this than to repurpose this device, but I think aesthetically it'll look interesting, and hopefully with some trial and error I'll be able to experiment with different cylinders, different substrate to use inside of it, and maybe I'll even be able to make it so I can swap out the cylinders so that I can try different tumblers and different finishing nails, and with the variable speed motor I can also control how fast it spins. So that's what I'm going to do. I opted not to use the original motor for a couple of reasons. One, I actually want to be able to turn this thing on and leave it running. So I just feel like 100-year-old motor with an old rheostat on it. I just don't know if it'd be the safest thing, even if I were to rewire it. Also, I want something that's variable speed so that I can fine-tune the speed at which I want to spin at without having to deal with changing gears or pulleys. It may even be the situation where I want to be able to have the control to gradually increase or decrease the speed. And it just so happens that I have a whole bunch of DC motors that are very quiet, that are variable speed. In fact, they are vibraphone motors that I found on eBay years ago. Being a percussionist, I purchased them because I wanted to have a working vibraphone motor for my vibraphone, and I found somebody that was selling them inexpensively, and I probably have about a half dozen of them. So I already have a motor that is going to run quietly, a variable speed with the controller, and it's small in size, so it'll fit inside of the box. And it also is quite quiet, which is obviously important if I want the sound coming from it to be from the tumbler. The only thing I don't like about the new motor is that obviously it looks modern, but it'll be hidden in the box. But the actual controller also looks modern, so that's a trade off I guess I'm willing to make. I always tell folks I'm more of a form over function guy, but in this case, I think the functionality is more important, and I think it'll still be a unique looking piece. I guess there's a part of me that really wishes that, if you saw this thing out in the wild, that it could be from the 1920s, and there's something kind of whimsical about that nature of it. And, well, unfortunately, it's going to have to be, one modern component that clearly is from, the last 20 years. But it's a trade off I'm willing to make. In addition to taking this thing apart, I've also had to figure out how I'm going to repurpose the main top here. So if you look at it, it's got those two nubs on the right that are going to be in the way of taking on and pulling off and pushing on the tumbler I'm going to make. So I got the grinder out and went to town on it. I'm trying to grind things as carefully as I can. It's my goal to remove those nubs and not grind into the base. In other words, the material I wish to keep, I hope not to grind past. Every once in a while, I stop and check my work, and also I'll check that the piece isn't getting too hot. I'm not sure if cast iron will warp from the heat of a grinder, but I don't wish to find out. So I'm just going to take my time. Anytime it feels like it's getting hot, I merely set down this piece and then go over to the sandblaster and sandblast the base. This keeps me from getting impatient and also helps me from therefore possibly ruining the piece I'm working on. It didn't take too long for me to get the nubs to come off. Once they're removed, then it's merely the task of grinding away the extra material. But so far I haven't slipped and hit the piece, or my knee for that matter. You really shouldn't be doing this on your lap. A bench and a pair of gloves is certainly safer. I am super careful though, and it's not as dangerous as using a saw or something, but you definitely should be wearing gloves and using a bench. This is just the way I'm more comfortable doing it. You can see here I'm getting a lot closer to the base, and pretty soon I'll switch over to using a file. So I'll grind until I'm almost flush, and then the last bit I'll do by hand with a file. And I'm also going to be sandblasting it. So if I get it close, the sandblasting should help kind of feather things in so you won't be able to see, hopefully anyway, where these previous nubs were. Today is brought to you by the word nub. Now that I'm using the file, I can relax a little bit. It's a much slower, almost tedious process using the file. The grinder will get things done quick, but can also wreck your work, where a file is slower, but really will even things out nicely. I tried to edit things quickly, but you can see here that things are looking okay. And I'm getting ready to sandblast it here. You can see the bolt that's going through where the bushing is. Being that a bushing is made from softer material, it's my goal to not damage it with the sandblasting. So I covered that up with the bolt. And now for the big reveal. Here it is. Look at that. You can't even see where the nubs were. Well, at least when it's sandblasted. I'm going to paint it in gloss black, so you might be able to see it a little bit, but not too bad for a guy using a grinder and a file.